All right, looks like we are going live. So we're just going to give people a few minutes to filter in, and then we will be launching this webinar. All right, well, that's probably enough air. I had planned to give everyone just a few minutes to filter in, but I think the silence is getting to me, so we're just going to launch in.
Okay.
All right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Content for Search and Measuring Impact. My name is Katie. I'm the digital marketing copywriter for Page One Power and your host for this webinar. So before we begin, I wanted to go over some general housekeeping. There will be a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so submit your questions and stick around for the answers. I will be in the chat handing out downloadables from Page One Power and BKA content, so keep your eye out for those. And lastly, we are recording the webinar, so you will get an email with the link. The downloadables will also be in the email if you don't get them from the chat. And that's it. Now let me hand it over to the speakers.
All right, thank you very much, Katie. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and start presenting. All right, let me just move some things around here. Okay. So as Katie said, this is Creating Content for Search and Measuring Impact. This is a partner webinar from Page One Power and BKA Content. Go ahead and flip the slide here. So I am Cory Collins. My title is Business Development Manager at Page One Power. That's just a fancy way of saying that I have my fingers in a little bit of everything at Page One Power. I work with our production managers on product creation and launch, work with our marketing team on our marketing strategy. I work a little bit with sales, with our project management team. And really my goal is just to make sure that we're developing the best services possible to achieve client results. I'm joined here today with Matt. Matt is the Chief Operating Officer at BKA Content. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm very similar to you, Cory. It's just, you had to find a title, so that's the one we threw up, but it's very similar. I'm involved in a lot of aspects of how we operate, new products, services. A lot of the research has gone into the strategy, all that stuff, even, client relationships. So I've been able to see a lot of every part of the content creation process over the last, 10, 12 years I've been here, but yeah, it's good.
Awesome. So as I said earlier, this is a partner webinar, and really the goal for this partner webinar is just to have a frank and honest conversation about creating content for search from two different agency perspectives. BKA Content and Page One Power have a history of running into each other a lot at trade shows and have formed sort of a partnership over time. And I just thought it'd be really fun to sit down and have an honest conversation about what it means to create content explicitly for search. Page One Power is originally a link building agency. We've gone more and more into SEO over time, but really content creation for Page One Power came naturally from needing to create content in order to build links for our clients. But over time, we've developed more and more and more content creation, and almost there are no campaigns that we sell anymore, that we execute anymore, that don't have some level of content creation for search baked into it. Matt, you want to give just a little bit of background on BK as well?
Yeah, I love that. It's funny, we're very similar, just from two different directions. So we originally have been an SEO content creation agency, white label solution for SEO agencies and anybody else, small, medium-sized businesses, enterprises, publishers that needed custom content solutions at scale. So we're a partner integration, always, focused on high quality writing, and then that SEO, training optimization standpoint. And over time, we've moved, more and more into the SEO stage, and, starting with content, moving to some of these other services like link building, like you guys do. But like you said, we've talked a lot over the years and developed a relationship. And I think it's fun seeing the two perspectives from linking and then from content. We're, obviously they're so related, they go hand in hand, but it's kind of fun to see both perspectives from either direction. So
absolutely. Yeah, and that's why I thought this partner webinar would be a lot of fun, is because while we've ended up in very similar spots, we came from two very different directions, and I think we've learned different lessons and insights over the years that we can share. So.
Absolutely.
All right, so jumping right into it, the first step in content creation for search really is the research process. So that's what we'll be talking about first. Research is ingrained in succeeding in search. You can't, at least from our perspective, from my perspective, you can't create content and then go and put it into an SEO checker and say, did I use the right keywords? Do I need to tweak some title tags, whatnot? It really begins with being much more intentional than that from the very beginning. And basically that's to say research is required to succeed in search. So the first thing that we do, Page One Power often engages in before we even start the process of content research, is discovery. We work directly with clients to figure out what is their goal with content creation, what is their goal in search, sort of timeline are they looking at. A lot of clients will always say as soon as possible, which is sort of the constant answer we get. But what we're looking to understand there is, what sort of resources do you have? Who are you competing against? Who are your direct competitors at a product level? Who's competing with you in the SERPs? What sort of experience and performance have you experienced in the past? And honestly, what internal resources do you have? What's your budget? Are you doing any other content marketing activities? There's so much complexity that can go into creating content for a singular client that you really need to understand the entire landscape of the project before you begin.
I was going to add to that, Cory. I think one other interesting thing too, like you said, I know where on your guys' side, the content is crucial to building the links. We've had an interesting spot there where the discovery phase, it's very similar to this, but it's kind of varied, because when they come in for individual content campaigns, it may be for link building, it may be for building a new website, it may be for blogging. And I think that timeline's been interesting for us, because with the content creation phase, right, content can be built for a specific campaign, but it also can be an ongoing thing. If you're creating it with strategy in mind, and maintaining it, it becomes an asset for campaigns down the road. So that's been an interesting thing, I think, from our perspective, the timeline. We when they come in just for content, it's let's get you should be doing content all the time, right? Like that leads to all sorts of opportunities in the future, and maybe makes that timeline easier to hit versus I have no content, I like results today. I already have, we're going to talk about this later, linkable assets, because I've been developing great SEO content all along the way. So
yeah, I love that. A lot of the times, the way we create content too is centered around that need. A good example of that is there are plenty of clients that come to us and have already been having success in content marketing and creating content for search, but now they're going to market with a brand new product, and they know that they're going to need from the ground up an entire SEO campaign to help them rank that new product, to make sure that they have a mid funnel, that they have a top funnel directly related to that product. And so that's the entire lens by which we look at this, is what do you need? What's the gap? What's the plan moving forward? So.
Absolutely.
All right, after discovery, the next thing that we really dig into on the research side is current performance. So I hit this a little bit, but we want to look at how are you currently performing in organic search? And that can mean, that alone can be a huge, exhaustive, ongoing research where we look at what is the waterfall of traffic to the site? what sections of the site are driving the traffic? Do you have existing content? How is that content performing? Is it related to your current goal? Is it not related, but creates a gap in between? You know, there's so much that you can look at. And one of the things too is looking at organic search. One thing that I always love to look at is what's your total traffic profile look like? How much are you getting from paid? How much is coming direct? How much is social? If it's literally all organic search, that's something that we really need to know. Or if there's very little organic search traffic happening, that's also something we need to know.
Yeah, I love that. This is honestly, this is almost identical to what we look at too, right? You want to understand where you guys are at in your kind of SEO journey, and then that helps us to know, well, this is where you can focus your time and opportunity. So I love that.
Yeah. After that, really, while we're looking at the organic performance, we also look a lot at target pages. So oftentimes a client will say, well, we want this product page to rank better. We're going to market with this new product. And so it's this section of the website. Or maybe they're saying, look, we just want our blog to perform better, or this content section of our website to perform better. The important thing to do there is to dig into organic search. Typically, we look at Search Console, Google Analytics, and SEMrush to understand how well is that performed over time, what kind of keywords is it currently ranking for, at what position, what are the competitors in the SERP currently, what's the link gap look like, what's the difference between the content that we have in our target pages versus what's currently ranking, all of that.
Yeah, I love that. That last part we do look at a lot, right? Especially when we're identifying, you know, we're given a list of keywords or topics that are the target. You know, the first thing you go, like you said, there's the gap. We use tools to look at the gap, but also even just seeing, you know, specifics, word count, you know, what's the word count of the content you're trying to beat out. I know you guys obviously look at how many links are already existing on the page and so many other things, but, you know, from a content perspective, we are looking at like, how is this optimized, right? Are they utilizing their real estate, their headings, their, you know, their alt text and their images, all these additional items from just a content perspective to beat out the content, you know, before we add any additional layers like links or anything else. So yeah, I do like that. We're very similar in how we do that.
Very cool. Yeah. One of the things that I find myself saying over and over and over and over again when we talk about both ranking existing pages and creating new content is you can't underestimate the value of just going and looking at the physical SERP that exists currently for the keyword that you're targeting. It seems like such a no-brainer, but it's amazing how often people sort of just blind spot that step because they're thinking about, well, I'm different, I'm unique, I have this vision in mind. But the reality is what you're doing when you're creating a piece of content, targeting a keyword, or trying to rank an existing page for a keyword, is that you're trying to prove out that you have the best page on the internet for that keyword. That's a hard thing to do if you don't know who you're competing against and what the existing pages look like that already rank.
And Cory, I would even add to that too. You've probably encountered this, but there's a lot of cool tools. I'm sure we'll get into some tools later as we talk, but there's some really cool tools that'll scrape and provide you a lot of that information from the get-go. I know we've worked with a lot of clients that have worked with, you know, things like Surfer SEO or Phrase.io. There's all these, and they're really impressive tools. Even SEMrush, some of these will provide templates and outlines based on other ranking pieces for the keywords. But it's funny, we kind of have to temper these tools a little bit. It's almost overwhelming. It's almost too much data, right? There's still this level of, just like you said, go to the page and see what's on there, right? Like just because something was ranking, it may not actually be the right, you know, you're maybe not targeting that same sort of approach, you know, or it's the wrong intent for the page, right? And it's maybe moving in the ranking. So I think taking a look and just having kind of a human element to know how to best utilize the tool, because we get that a lot. We'll sometimes get projects that come in, people want us to use a certain tool and they want it to be, you know, 100% on the tool, but there's always this level of, okay, you know, we are working with SEO optimization, but we're trying to create really, really good content that people are going to read and engage with. And I know you guys are too. So there has to be a level of, I know the limits of a tool, you know, I know how far it can take me. I know the limits and I know when, you know, to use my judgment to go and take a look. So
yeah, I love that. Analysis paralysis is a very real
there
thing.
you
go. We say it all the time that strategically you have to know what you're attempting to achieve and you need to know who you're competing against. But at the end of the day, all the research doesn't actually accomplish the work unless you start the work. So.
Yeah.
One other thing on this list that I think is worth just touching on a little bit, I think we hit a few of these other elements, is identifying supporting content. So a lot of times clients come to us and say, well, we want to rank this product page, this service category, this whatever it may be. And then we look at their blog, and their blog is, you know, a few hundred articles, some performing better than others, and maybe there's like tags on it, right? But at the end of the day, there's no like subfolder structure or any real like coherence or organization around it to let us know which piece of content is supposed to support that goal. And so one of the things that we have to do very commonly as we're getting ready to create content for our clients and backlinks is to look at and tie back to what supporting content currently exists, and then where's the gap. And so reviewing and ranking keywords fits right within that.
No, I love that. I think too, just some context for us, we do get clients that will come in and want the full SEO package, but we do get a lot that come in just for the content, kind of like an ongoing blogging package to help build out their keyword organic profile, literally creating this supporting content that you can then use probably in your campaigns for link building. And sometimes they become, you know, the pillar page themselves, depending on, you know, the keyword and the intent. But that is interesting, because we will look, you know, that exact same thing. We try to build that content from the ground up, where it is either supporting, you know, that main page for the short tail keyword and also winning a keyword on its own. But it's kind of an interesting approach when they come in, you know, to develop kind of a larger organic profile. Maybe that's the goal, right? It's either maintenance, or I want something on autopilot that helps me kind of develop my organic profile, rank for more keywords in different keyword families and clusters. And then at that point, I have assets to then go and maybe create a more specific niche, you know, campaign for. So I do think that's interesting. You are right. Like, we go into a lot of content when we go and do this first analysis and see what they're currently ranking for. I think sometimes people just don't know how to use the blog, right? It's like, what am I using a blog for? You know, am I just trying to get up a few posts a month that speak to my reader base, or is it an SEO play? And in our experience, it's both, right? It's absolutely both if you do it right. But it comes back to that research and performance phase. What do people want to hear about? And then what are the keywords most closely associated with that? What are the conversion pages on someone's site that I can lead them to through that blog post, right? Depending on where that blog is in the marketing funnel. But yeah, that's kind of how we've seen on our end too, is we are developing potentially that supporting content for future link building campaigns. So we try to build it with that in mind, internal linking profile, even, you know, external linking without giving away obviously your authority through anchor text links. But yeah, I like that. That's interesting. Again, it's two different approaches, right? It kind of comes back to your goals. Right. If your goal is this all-encompassing SEO package, it's going to be more holistic that way. For us, it may be, how do I expand my, you know, it's maybe not as aggressive to start. It's, I want to get something going, prove the model that SEO works, rank for keywords. And then at that point, I'll turn it up a notch, invest some more money, and start, you know, really going after those more competitive keywords. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We hear that from clients quite a bit too, where they have limited budget, limited runway. They need to show success before they can really go deep in an investment in search. Sure. So, all right, continuing along in this research process, the next thing that we look at is competitive research. So we talked about analyzing our clients' performance. The next thing we really need to look at is looking at our direct competitors and our search competitors. It's very common that clients know exactly who their direct competitors are. It's less common that they know exactly who their search competitors are. A great way to think about this is, Matt, I think I heard you say it, sometimes the informational page actually ends up being the pillar page, because a client comes to us and says, I want to rank for what appears to be a product keyword, but when you go look at the SERP for that, actually what's ranking is a bunch of what is definitional, long pillar pages that aren't actually the product themselves, but instead an explanation of what that product or service is. And so a lot of times we'll find competitors who are doing really well in search, in the SERP, that don't actually compete at a product level with our client.
Oh yeah, that matters a lot, right? That's that whole search intent part. Like, you may think you have the perfect keyword, but it's not actually either not the keyword you want, or you're not creating the right type of content to win that keyword. So yeah, that's really important to look at those, see what people are doing, and see if it both aligns, right? Because you may end up going a different direction, or either in your keyword or in, you know, the type of content you create to win it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And typically what this means for us when we're looking at all of these things is first we find direct competitors by talking to our client, and then also just searching for their products and seeing who else comes up. After that, we're in the SERPs again, looking again at their keywords that they care the most about to see who comes up but isn't a one-to-one direct competitor. After that, what we do is we generally pop into SEMrush. There's a lot of good tools out there. Ahrefs and SEMrush are commonly the most to use, but we use SEMrush to go in and look at in bulk, what are our competitors, both search and direct, ranking for? Which pages are driving the most traffic? Are those pages content? Which content pages are performing the best? Does our client have that type of content? Are they missing on that kind of content? And really look at those keywords in bulk, in mass, at the page level, and then go back and review the SERPs again and say, do we really think that we belong here, that our client belongs here? Do we think that we can make a page that is better than anything else that exists in the SERP currently?
Yeah, no, we're the same. So we're using SEMrush. Is it SEMrush or SEMrush? Can we decide
I'll
right this
dial that
second? You're gonna stand, yeah. It's always been SEMrush to me, but I swear it's called SEMrush now. I don't know.
I think they came out and said that, but it's too late.
It's too late.
I've been doing this for 11 years. I've been saying SEMrush. I'm too old to change my
Yeah, I'm with you, man. No, we're the same way though with that kind of that competitive research between both, right? We don't want to, if you are winning certain keywords, we don't want to go after those keywords again, right? Those are already assets that can be used in a campaign. And when we're looking for new keywords, we're analyzing that competitor gap. That same thing, we're looking at search intent to know what sorts of topics, to create to help win that content. And again, our perspective typically is we come in at just the content level. Like we're trying to prove the content from an SEO perspective. So we want to help get you on the board for keywords. We want Google to tell us that your content, they see something in your content that's good enough to be an authority on a keyword. And once we have that, we have all sorts of options, right? At that point, we can say, hey, what catalyst do we apply to this piece of content to get you to the next level? But our approach is kind of, we take a strategic approach to find the keyword families we want to target, and then we prove that content to know what the next steps are going to be. But again, it all starts here. We do look at, like you said, we ask them, our clients, who their competitors are. We then go into SEMrush, SEMrush, whatever, and we look at the organic profile to make sure that matches. And then we don't want to cannibalize, and we want to kind of adjust and go after the keywords they want. And also we want to be realistic. I think you've probably seen this too, Cory, and we're going to talk about opportunity pages, but sometimes, a client will come in and say, it's got to be this word. And it's like, okay, but that might take 5 years and, $1 million. So let's be realistic about what your goals are, what your budget is, what's realistic to win, and kind of move on from there. And I think that's what I love about content, is content gives you kind of a good starting point to know where to invest, right? If Google sees something in your content around certain keyword families, and maybe you'll find opportunity in a keyword family you didn't originally think. Maybe in your mind it was this keyword, but it's actually this adjacent keyword that has nearly as much volume, but it's a much more winnable search term. So I think that's all really important. That's where, experience and data come in to kind of find those real opportunities. We're in the business, right? We want to see results, and we want results that matter. So I'm not going to, you're probably the same way. If we come in and there's, somebody wants something that's just not realistic, we could take someone's money and run out the campaign, but I'd rather find actual real opportunity that then builds an organic profile to then you can win those big ones over time. So anyways, I know I'm rambling, but this is, like you said, this is probably the most important part of any of these campaigns.
Yeah, I love what you said there too about the going after, like, this is our goal, right? And it's like, okay, that's a very lofty long-term goal. We're definitely going to work towards that. But what are the realistic targets that we can go after starting today, that we can go after in the upcoming months? I think content creation, especially for SEO, for driving search traffic, for ranking for certain keywords, opens up so much opportunity. A lot of times clients are doing well with existing content, with existing pages, and trying to force multiply that with links. That can definitely work. But at the end of the day, if you're trying to drive traffic, there's often a huge slice of unrealized opportunity by going after new keywords, even the longer tail keywords that seem on the surface to be less traffic opportunities. It's amazing how much bulk traffic there can be behind a head term that only has, you know, sub 1,000 monthly search volume with all the variation sitting underneath it. And especially if you can tie that back to the customer or the client research journey as they're getting ready to make a product decision, right? That's where you can really drive a business impact and show success in search at the same time.
Absolutely. And I like the way you put that. I think there's room for all sorts of keywords too, right? I think sometimes people feel like, well, I can only win the long tail keywords and it's going to take me 10 years. And some people think, well, I only need to win the super high volume ones that are going to cost me a fortune. But in my experience, and I think you've seen this too, there's two approaches. You can do both, right? And you can decide how much of each that you do, right? The link building is going to help you catapult higher for search terms, but it is more of an investment where if you have a little bit, if time's on your side, you can do a little bit of a wider net approach and find those kind of gold mines of keywords that maybe don't take as much work to win over time. It's a little bit cheaper. It takes a little bit longer, right? There's a risk reward for both, but they can honestly be ongoing, right? There can be one where you're actively gaining new keywords through, you know, an affordable campaign, and then you hone in on the ones, you know, that you found that are profitable, and then you invest in those specific campaigns as those come up. So I kind of like, I don't know, over time I've seen there's room for both, right? It's never one or the other. I think if you do it right, and SEO content is the backbone, you can still do it affordably and target both of those. And I think it just comes to, I think that's what's fun about this, Cory, is from a content perspective, you're able to cut out a lot of the fluff, right? A lot of times I know with an agency, there's just a million things that can be bought. But from a content perspective, like we know, like there's certain building blocks that happen in organic search with SEO. And we've seen these two different sides. So let's go right to the building block, you know, and then build off that building block. And I think that's how you do it efficiently, and actually see ROI, right? There's so many people that start with agencies and they don't see the results they want. Maybe the expectations were wrong, or what they were being sold was not what they actually needed. And then it's kind of this start and stop mentality. But in my experience, it's like an ongoing thing, and you decide maybe when to invest heavier into certain things as you go, but it's not something you start and stop over and over again in my experience. So
yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Well, I think that we are very ambitious in how much we're going to cover today, so I'm going to keep us moving along.
True.
For this, I think any of these topics are something that we could have done an entire webinar about, especially with like a data deep dive and showing. But today, I think our goal is really to just cover the entire process from beginning to end. So the next thing that we commonly do at Page One Power once we get to this moment is we go back to the client, typically with a report and a series of topics based upon that report with our findings. And so within that, we cover our methodology, what we found in our deep dive in this research. We have some core recommendations for things that should be done moving forward. And then we have topic ideas for explicitly what content are we going to create from here. And those topic ideas are paired directly to keyword targets. How do you typically present here's what we're going to create on the content side, Matt? How does that work for BK?
Yeah, that is interesting. It can be done a couple different ways. With our SEO blogging subscription, that's kind of the ongoing building content over time. We will develop, you know, obviously a list of keywords and topics we'd like to go after. And our methodology, we look at it in phases, right? Like depending on where you're at currently, if you're a pretty big site that's got a ton of organic, kind of like you talked about, a lot of keywords already, you know, you have a good profile, you can go after the more competitive keywords. If you're a brand new website, if you're kind of a newer business to this, we're going to look at the more winnable type keywords. So we'll kind of present that. We like to do it though. Sometimes you're surprised. We'll kind of vary word counts. We'll vary, you know, different difficulty of keywords when we're kind of doing a campaign like that to see what they're going to rank for. And then I guess the only thing that's different for us, or not different, but maybe different than a lot of people, is we do look at the blogs as assets. So we'll actually track every single blog post to see what it's ranking for, if it's ranking for the right keywords, how quickly it's ranking. And you know, instead of just throwing something at the wall every month, hoping it sticks and only tracking your main keywords, we actually look at the blogs and say, hey, this one ranked for something slightly different than what we intended, but this might be better than what we originally did. And so we kind of look at it that way, and that's how we track it over time. But yeah, the presentation early on is typically keywords and topics per the campaign they're looking to do. So
I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I love the idea of tracking everything and seeing everything as an asset. That's something we try to do quite a bit here at Page One Power as well, although we've always been much more on the SEO end and typically looking at product and those types of rankings. And then using, as I said at the beginning of this webinar, we really started our content creation journey just looking at creating linkable assets. And so while those often ranked in search and drove traffic and ranked for various keywords that were relevant to our client, really we cared most about the link building. And so we've slowly migrated over to recognizing the value of content solely for the purpose of ranking, for going after specific keywords, for driving that search traffic. And so building out and keeping track and building a database of how is our content doing is something that we've been growing over and over.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so just to re-summarize basically everything that we just talked about, a detailed approach outperforms a mass approach. I really can't emphasize this enough. I think I heard you say it directly, Matt, that at the end of the day, you have to be very focused in what you're attempting to achieve and keep track of how that's performing and continue to optimize based on that.
Yep.
All right, so next, this is going to be a little bit more on the Page One Power side, although I know BK is doing more and more on the link building side as well. But one of our core competencies that we look at is linkability as we create content. So really, there's three different ways Page One Power looks at this. We look at audience value, we look at citation, and now we're beginning to experiment with both a relevant digital PR version approach. So that first one, I think, yeah, so I'm just going to keep going, and Matt, please feel free to butt in.
Oh, you're good. I want to hear this stuff. So you go through this. This is good.
So when we think about audience links, what this really means is we create an in-depth guide that's hyper specific to an audience online. And the way we come up with this is first we take our client and we look at, okay, what industry are you in? What's a relevant topic that we can build off of that? And how does that topic intersect with an audience that has a strong community online, that has a list of resources dedicated to them, where we can find opportunities to promote this once we've created it. And so then we spin that all up into a title, we identify what resources we'll need across that piece of content, and then we build that into an outline. We go back to the client and we say, here's exactly what we're thinking. Typically, there's a certain amount of back and forth that we go through with the client to make sure that we're as relevant as possible while also keeping it broad to that linkability audience. Then we'll look at competing pieces and say, who else has competing content in this space and what kind of backlinks exist to those. Again, making sure that we're building something that genuinely leads to a lot of link opportunity. And then within that, we go back to the piece and make sure that we have strategic internal links embedded throughout. Because again, it's not just that we're trying to build links for the sake of links. We're trying to achieve a very specific result for our client. Typically, that result is tied directly to a product keyword in some way. And so we know that we need strategic internal links that are relevant, that are contextual, that tie back into our clients' product terms, product pages, so that we can build out topical authority as well as float that internal link equity back to the right pages. One very important thing within this is that we always make sure that we have 100 outreach opportunities when we create one of these long in-depth guides. That may seem excessive, but bear in mind that we're going out and all we're doing is promoting this content and saying we think a link makes sense. We have no control. We don't incentivize in any way. A 5 to 10% conversion rate is honestly incredibly, incredibly high for us. That means 100 link opportunities, 100 emails, multiple rounds of follow-up, we'll see on the high side 5 to 10 links, but it may be as few as 3. That's pretty common for us. So these need a lot of elbow grease to make them work, but they have a lot of value. The next one that we think about is citation links. And I think, Matt, this may fall more in line with how you folks do link building over at BKA. But this is basically, is there an opportunity to cite the piece of content we're creating in a new piece of content in the future? So we do things like guest blogging, guest posting, and this just is an opportunity to make sure that there's a clear focus, a clear value prop, that it has reasonable information within it that someone would find useful in citing in a future post, a future piece of content.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely more in line with kind of the mainstream. We're looking for linkable content in terms of citation. So that's great.
Yeah. Typically what we found with this is that while we would love to have this be fairly keyword centric as well, what we found is that it's much more helpful to have it be a little bit broader than the typical keyword funnel you build out for a client's product page. So typically these tend to be a little bit more on the broader side, but have a very clear, relevant contextual tie-in in some way.
Gotcha.
And then last but not least is digital PR. So Page One Power has been building links for over a decade now. I've been with the company for 11 years. And over that period of time, we've seen many agencies move over to wholly digital PR for link building. The common complaint that we've seen other clients have with that is that how relevant is a very creative piece meant for digital PR to their actual SEO goals. And so when we say digital PR, we mean something hyper relevant that is promotable. It's very similar to that longer form piece of content that I described earlier, but instead of being hyper audience focused, this is more in line with statistics driven, something on the data visualization end that is very relevant to the direct industry of our client. And again, we're looking for opportunities to promote that. I think that pretty well wraps it up. Any additional thoughts you want to share there, Matt, about linkability and content creation?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, even with the link building we've been getting into, those are the three, right? Those are the three core ones. The thing I love about the way you guys do link building too is it's this custom outreach, right? That's what we believe in too. Or we're not, I don't know, we're all about, we want to present something that has lasting value beyond just the campaign. And this, when it's done the right way, right, you get good links. It's lasting. It's not, you know, it's not the cheap stuff, right? But it's the good stuff, and that's what matters, that you're moving the needle. So this is really good.
Awesome. So basically our mantra when it comes to adding linkability to content, it's find the reason that someone would be willing to link, build the content out, and then measure the impact of, can I get links back to that piece? After that, we get into measuring the initial performance of content. So there, as Matt said earlier, there's a whole slew of measuring time to impact. How long does it take to rank? But one thing that we often look at is what's the initial performance right out of the gate. And so typically we measure by three different metrics. One is links, if we're creating linkable content. Another is keywords. And then the third is traffic. Keywords and traffic tend to go hand in hand, but typically they're a little bit more goal centric. The two different goals, right? One can be, I care very much about a small set of keywords that don't have a ton of traffic, but if we rank for those keywords, huge success. Whereas I'm less concerned about the specific keywords as long as they're relevant. What I'm looking is to increase my overall traffic. And so just slightly different goals there. So getting into that, measuring link success, we always set out with specific audience and goals for our linkable content. We want to be able to build links. That's fundamentally what we're looking to achieve. And so for our outreach-based content, we're always looking at, okay, we had a list of 100 websites. How many were we able to find after that? When we emailed these people, what was the responses like? Were they happy that we were contacting them? What kind of feedback did they actually have about the piece of content that we were promoting? After the responses, what was the conversion rate like? How many links actually came out of that versus how many sites did we outreach? And then what did the links themselves look like? One of the things that we are constantly having to explain to clients is that for a piece of content like this, while we can guarantee general guidelines about what the links will look like, when we're contacting 100 websites and we know that we'll get 5 to 10 links out of it, we don't get to choose which 5 to 10 actually end up linking. We don't have control over that. And so we can set some general guidelines about the sites we find, but we don't know what the actual links will look like until we get to the end of the process and see the links happen. We have clients all the time who are saying, you know, we love links from EDUs, from govs, .orgs. It's like, we would too, and we're definitely going to include that. But at the end of the day, like, this is very organic link building, and we can't guarantee what links will come out at the end. And then finally, we look at our time commitment to secure all of that work, because that's a very important piece of the equation too. You know, we can always guarantee a certain amount of links, but what we want to do is guarantee effective work, and not just that the work eventually gets done based on doing a ton of it over and over and over again. I'm going to just skip along just a little bit because we're already at the 40-minute mark. And I think we'll just go over to measuring the keyword success. So next, what we look at when measuring the initial impact of our keyword content, where we're targeting a hyper-specific keyword, is do we fundamentally think the content is the best version of content that exists online for that keyword? It's such an easy thing to overlook, but that is one of the things I love most about content creation, is that there is inherent value in the content itself, right? We're always trying to achieve that result, but let's not forget that we're creating something that has tangible inherent value. And that's what we talk about when we say, is this better than anything else that exists on the web? Can we hang our hat on that? And then, of course, is it ranking? Is it ranking for that keyword? And is that keyword valuable to our client? Can we tie that directly back? And then as we see that ranking happen, is it having the impact that we thought it would at the outset?
Oh, I love that, Corey. I have some goals on mine the same way, right? When you're looking at content, just measuring the content itself, we typically, when we create a piece, we'll let it sit, right? And we know it can take up to 90, 120 days to see kind of where Google ends up, ranking it. A lot of times the good ones rank a lot quicker than that, but there's kind of this range. But we'll look and first, we actually do look at the ranking. Once we've done the strategy up front and built the piece, we've looked at what's already out there. We've tried to outdo whatever's out there in our initial piece. We look and see where it sits on the ranking. A, is it ranking for the right keyword, or the keywords that we were targeting initially? B, like, where is it ranking? And then C, kind of like you said, how does it compare to the other ones that are already out there? Because a lot of times, we'll start with something, because for instance, with content, right, you have a few things or tools at your disposal. You have word count, you have visuals, images, you have your structure, your formatting with headings, whatever else, and then the way you optimize maybe the types of keywords you're inserting in there. So one thing we like to do too is, if it's, we take a look at that kind of 90-day range and we say, is it ranking for the right keyword? If it is, where is it ranking, and where do we feel like it should be ranking with just the content alone, and what tools do we have to go and maybe readjust? And then number two, if it's ranking, not for the right keyword, but another one that we'd love to win as well, we'll go in and actually re-optimize that piece. And that's where, looking at it as an asset and measuring its success, you don't have to start over. You know what I mean? Instead of just starting over and building content over and over and over again, if you actually measure it, there's a lot of opportunity. It either is going to hit what you wanted it to hit, or it may hit something you didn't intend to hit, but you can take and run with that, right? And then obviously, if it doesn't hit, then yes, you may have to start over at some point. But I do love that. That is a very similar way to how we measure that content after about 90 days. So.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned 90 days. We found very similar things that typically, to really understand how a piece of content is going to perform, typically it needs about 90 days live to see what kind of traction it's really getting.
Exactly. Yep.
I also like that you mentioned sometimes you hit keywords that are very tangentially related to the main keyword that you were targeting, but slightly different. It's amazing how often I see that happen, where it's like, sometimes you're going after a slight variant and you end up with something slightly different. It's amazing how many different cohorts of keywords there are that exist online, where you think, well, I didn't achieve the keyword I was trying for. That's a failure. It's like, well, is it? Because, there's this keyword right here that we might have targeted in the near future, or maybe even planned to target, that we ended up succeeding with this piece. Let's do a slight tweak.
Absolutely. And we've done some pretty extensive testing over the content we've done. And it's interesting too, because you find if it's ranking, well, it's just, there's little things that you alter can help improve the ranking on top of just adding, external links or anything else to it, with just the content itself, right? Like if you have a piece, it's ranking for something tangentially related, you could go back in and try and readjust the whole content to win the keyword you're wanting. We found the path of least resistance is to go in and re-optimize. I get, depending on the campaign, that may or may not be something you can do, but literally re-optimizing and using the primary, the new primary keyword in the headings and throughout, like you can jump, if it was already ranking high, you do that now. It's opportunity. You add that in, you might jump at another 5 or 10 spots in the rankings without having to do anything else. You're just trying to get closer and closer, right? Without doing as much work? How do you get there more efficiently? But yeah, I like that. That's exactly how we look at it. I get with the campaign, you may, if you're close enough and you can make some adjustments and still win the keyword you were targeting, and it is by far the better keyword, like definitely do that. But if it is related and there's, similar value, in my opinion, I would go after the one that Google already says, hey, I see something in your content about this keyword. We'll take that and run with it, because that usually means a lot. So
yeah, absolutely. We do something fairly similar too with, we do what we call revisions essentially. And so we go in and look at, okay, what pages already exist. A lot of times we might say, hey, we want to target this keyword, but now that we're looking, we see that you have this page and it's ranking middling for that keyword. And it is fundamentally about that. It just needs to be bulked up. And so we'll go in, and instead of creating a whole new page, a whole new piece of content, we just go and revise the existing page.
Absolutely. Yeah. A much cheaper way to get there, right, than starting over every time. So
yeah. All right, after that, we've got measuring traffic success. So again, it all comes back to the only way you get any traffic from organic search is ranking for keywords, right? That you're ranking for those keywords that people are searching for, that drives traffic back to your site. So typically what we look at with this is, are you ranking for generally the keywords you expected? Is that meeting your expectations of how much traffic that's actually driving? Can we tie that again back to a valuable? And I think, Matt, you mentioned the whole re-optimizing as well. And then just saying, is this impactful? Is this achieving what we expected at the outset?
Yeah, it's great.
All right, so again, the goal with all of this is our strive to increase authority, trust, and expertise with content. And by doing this, we can impact direct SEO goals, even beyond the content that we ourselves are creating. This is all tangential and tied together to float up the entire website, the entire category that we're working on. So I believe last but not least in this webinar is a conversation about presenting the performance. And so just achieving success, we've found, unfortunately, isn't enough. You have to convince the client and share with the client what that success means, what that looks like. As much as we all live out of Search Console, SEMrush, Google Analytics, we all have to remember that our clients have a wider view, that they have a different perspective, that they're focused on slightly different goals that are supported by our drive to succeed in organic search. So the way we talk about this commonly is we succeed when our clients succeed, right? That just because we achieved what we set out to achieve doesn't necessarily mean success. Success is when the client actually realizes that success and celebrates that success. So over the years, I actually had the pleasure of managing our project management team for a few years and worked really hard on building out our reportage. And basically, we've broken our reportage into 3 separate elements. One is project reportage, one is work reportage, and then finally we have results reportage. We always care most about results, but you can't get there without keeping really good track of the project itself. Timeline, scope, what are you doing, what's the budget tied to, and then reporting on, okay, not just what's the scope of the project, but what's the actual work that we've done, and making sure that the client has a clear understanding of how they can get into their own reportage and see the exact work that's been done on that campaign. So let's go ahead and take this one bite at a time. There's a lot, again, that we could cover here. I think I could talk about this without taking a breath for about an hour. So I'll try really hard not to do that. Project reportage is probably exactly what you think. First of all, project scope. Next is saying, okay, here's what we're doing within this project. Here's our overall strategy. Here's how we're explicitly going to go after the result that you want. Making sure that they understand and that they approve and that we have that clearly documented. Same with topic approval when we're creating content, right? The only way that we actually create content that serves the core value of helping our clients succeed is if they're invested in each step, meaning topic approval. After we get topic approval, we go to outlines. So we create actual outlines so that the client just doesn't understand where are we going, but exactly how are we doing it. Then, of course, the articles themselves as they get published and the timeline on that, and then the content goals. What was the goal for each piece of content? Is it achieving those goals? Are there links involved in all of this? The answer is almost always yes. And then the challenges and outcomes that we had throughout the project. So that's typically what we mean when we talk about project reportage.
Looks good.
Cool. After that, we've got results reportage. And so typically what this means is what work did we do in our content creation? So when did we submit the topic for approval? When did we submit the outline? When did we submit the full article? When was it published? When did it start achieving rankings, traffic? Which was the top performing content that we created? What results is tied to that? What kind of links? What's the monetary value of each piece of content? And what's the overall SEO strategy and support oh, I skipped one. I knew I was, well, we're here now. So we went. But
Results are all that matter, Cory. Come on.
Well, that's the honest truth. But basically documenting the work and saying, how does that tie back to results? So one thing that we've learned at Page One Power, and I'd love to hear your perspective, Matt, at BK, is we've tried to do a series of different results reportage over the years. And, some of that was using BI tools or Data Studio to keep track of this in mass, or helping our clients know how to look into Search Console or Google Analytics, or creating custom views, all of that. But what we found actually to be the most impactful is having a certain amount of results reportage live that a client can see at any time, but also really, really supporting that with presentations. So typically at the end of the term of the contract, we go in and do a big presentation, say, here's exactly what we achieved. But we can also do it at other periods too, as clients need.
No, I love that. I know with the linking, I like that too, kind of the transparency of when a link is published, some of that. It's great to see those results in real time. It depends a little bit on the campaign that we're running. Like if we're talking about just the content campaign of from an SEO blogging perspective, we typically do it where it takes 90 days to see results. We'll kind of do highlights monthly, and then kind of a 3-month check-in where we go, deep dive into the transparency of all of them, what the top performing ones are, where they're sitting in the ranking, positions 1 to 3, 3 to 10, on, and kind of give them, some idea of traffic and keywords, and even features like the featured snippet, some of those sorts of things. And then we'll go into kind of strategy as well. So we kind of that 3-month check-in is a bit of a transparency, and here's what we see and what we'd like to do going forward over the next 3 months. And then it's a little bit lighter month to month, just because not as much is changing every month. In some of those campaigns, I get with the link building, you probably are seeing bigger jumps, and obviously people want to see exactly what those links are doing. So we're working with a lot of content, we kind of like you said, we could overwhelm with a ton of data, but we're trying to highlight the things that matter. Like this is where you're going, this is where we are, here's the things to celebrate, and here's kind of the next steps as we go on. So
yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, that really was for us what we had to do. Was we were trying to do constant reporting, and with a lot of our clients, we have a phone call every 2 weeks, or a Zoom video, much like this, where we face-to-face with the client and talk about their campaign, where we're at, the work we're doing, next steps, all of that. But what we found is we really need that moment to step back every so often and make sure that the client understands where we're at.
Yeah.
And we're all content creators here, and what we found is that a lot of times reporting on results requires a certain narrative, right? A certain story behind it, to make sure that everyone understands both what we're trying to achieve and where we're at in the progress of achieving that. So, and we found that those presentations really help, even when clients have a certain amount of access to live real-time data about everything.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it's, like you said, it's good for us and our clients, right? Like we want to hold ourselves accountable and make sure we're going in the right direction. But also, to your point, there's so many things that could be considered. It's nice to know, what the goals of the campaign were, and put it in the context of those goals and what we were trying to accomplish. Because at this point, anything could look like a success or a failure depending on how you're looking at it. So yeah, that narrative is important, I think, for both parties.
Absolutely. Well, I think enough said there. Really just display the outcomes, build trust with the client. And Matt, one of the things I love that you just said is that it creates a feedback loop for yourself and your team as well. It's not enough just to be on the treadmill running forward all the time. You have to step back and say, how am I doing? Am I improving? Is what I'm setting out to do being successful?
Yeah, Yep. You said it too, we succeed when clients succeed, right? If they're not succeeding, we're out of business. So
A lot of truth in that. We succeed when our clients succeed. Well, that I think takes us to basically the end of this presentation, the end of this webinar. We do have just a few minutes for questions if anyone wants to pop any in. Otherwise, I'll just assume that we did a perfect job and no one has a single question. Well, looks like we're good on the questions front, I would say.
yeah, it looks like, I don't know if I'm looking at the right thing, but.
Hey, we do have a question in the Q&A. It's from Randy. It says, what is the best way to organize menus to enhance the user journey and move visitors to the cart?
That's probably a question for you, Cory. I could talk about maybe what we've seen from a ranking perspective with menus, but as far as the customer journey, if you want to tackle that one, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of menus, so if you mean like truly like drop down top of the website menu, that's a whole question, but I'm going to tackle that in maybe a slightly different way. One of the ways that we often look at content to try to continue to drive users down the funnel as we're trying to achieve is to make sure that there's a certain amount of interconnectedness across everything that we're creating, both in terms of topical relevance and links. And maybe the best version of this is when a client launches a new section of their website and says, hey, this is the product category that we care most about. And everything that we create lives off that subfolder in some way. And that's not applicable to every client. It depends on your business. Like if you're e-commerce, you can't have, 1,000 subfolders for your content. But if you're a website or a business that offers just a few very specific solutions or services, it is possible to create what is basically like that hub and spoke model, or I've heard it called parent and child as well, where that parent page is literally the top level product page and everything comes off of subfolders off of that. If you want to talk about driving the website visitors down the funnel, that's an almost perfect way to do it, especially if you're creating keyword content, there's no reason you can't have a CTA or two embedded within that content, right? And breadcrumb navigation to continue to force them back down the right thing. A great example of that is like, if your product is, I'm looking at my desk, I have running headphones on my desk right now, so we're going to use that example. But like, if one of your questions that you want to talk about is how do you make waterproof headphones or something of that nature, and so you have a product category that is running headphones and then waterproof, right? And then we answer all the questions about waterproofing headphones from a general information level, not from a product information level, right? Making sure that all filters back to those running headphones that actually offer water protection. Hopefully that answered that pretty well. Matt, anything you want to add there?
No, I think you nailed it. Yeah, it's the parent child. I know that's hard though, right? Like the menus are always hard. We're always struggling on that even with our own site, right? Like how do you present it in a way that's maybe good for SEO as well as like the journey. The way you explain it is really good, especially with the product. You're kind of using the categorical approach to the different product types. I think that's super smart. I think that's good for SEO too. We've seen a lot of that testing too, right? Where you have your pillar pages in your nav. I mean, Google uses that as an indicator of this is how important that page is on your site. So I think having that in mind is good. But yeah, ultimately it could be a tough question depending on how many, products and services you offer and how you present it. I know that's a difficult challenge, but I think the way you explained it was really good.
Awesome. Any other questions, Katie?
Yes, this one is kind of a long one. So as someone who works on a multi-location site, 11 total locations under one domain, how would you recommend I begin to discover the low-hanging fruit pages to work on with specific keywords, particularly geo-targeted keywords?
Well, that's a great question. I'm assuming that based on having 11 locations, that these are brick and mortar places and that maybe it's better to get people to go into the location versus make a purchase online. And so one of the things that I would do there is go, and typically geolocations are going to be lower search volume, right? Because you're naturally adding an extra layer to what would typically be a higher search volume keyword. But I would just go look and see if you have, again, search competitors that are directly competing at the geo level. And what you might find is that geo level plus exact product doesn't have enough search volume to be a piece of content that you really want to create. But instead, maybe information about the geo is just as important as information about the product, right? And so attacking it in two different directions, one where you explain a lot about your product or your service and building out that funnel, but then also creating a very geo targeted funnel as well to try and help you rank better for keywords that are directly relevant to your overall geo.
Yeah, I would say I think that's 11 opportunity wells, right? Like, I love the way you said, I think you could approach it both ways. You could approach it from the geo way, right? Go and find competitors in those geolocations, find that gap. I think the other way you could do, where you only have 11 locations, you could just find, kind of those main keywords, and then search across the different 11 locations using those same keyword phrases, right? And you might find opportunity in all. You might find you have some tougher competition in others, but where you only have 11, you could approach it that way too, if you know where you're starting from, like your main, converting keyword phrases. But that's exciting. Actually, it's fun. I don't know if Cory's like this. I love the keyword research stuff. It's just fun. I love spreadsheets, but it's fun to get in there and you just find like a good vein, right? And you're like, this is what I can kind of mine this and see what I can get out of it. So that is, there's a lot, it sounds like there's probably a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. And one thing I'll just tack on there too is like thinking about, let's say you're working for like a dental practice, right? If one of the things that you offer a lot of is like, say, Invisalign, like that's a very competitive keyword to go after. But based on how your practice offers it, there's probably longer tail versions of that.
Yep.
It's worth going after. And even though that's not going to be geo-targeted, that will still have an impact on your overall SEO to be able to rank for that keyword. You're more likely to rank for the geo version as well, because you're winning at the national level too for informational content.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that would be my next step, is go for the longer tail, and it doesn't hurt you to add the geolocation on there, just like you said. I mean, it can't hurt to win it at a broader level and still narrow it down to, qualify your traffic if they get to the page. But yeah, I would do both. Absolutely.
Yeah, the way we often talk about that is topical authority. And so if you're, Invisalign, and I'm out of Boise, so in Boise, right? Well, what better way to build topical authority than to be recognized as a national provider of information related to Invisalign?
Absolutely. Yep.
Any other questions?
That's it.
We nailed it. And well, we are over. I thought we did it perfect in time, but
so close.
Well, everyone, thank you very much for joining. Matt, thank you so much. Huge shout out to BKA Content. Great folks. Really appreciate you joining the party.
Yeah, thanks for letting me be here. So
everyone have a great rest of your day and happy Thursday.
Okay, see you later.
Bye, everyone.